Welcome everyone to the first ever Bad Mates podcast. I'm your host Medina, and with me, as always, is my co-host Michael.
Hey everyone, this is going to be a weekly podcast that exists to serve as a hub for the Runeterra community. We're going to talk about the meta, the community itself, and help you stay up to date with Riot news.
You might be wondering who we are or why you should care about our opinions.
I don't want to get too existential this early, but I often wonder that myself.
Um, I, Michael and I belong to a group of competitive gamers who typically really enjoy competing in the card game space, card game arena. We've both worked in various card games, some of which you've probably never heard of, some of which you might have heard of. Um,
Yeah, I mean, to give you a reason that you might actually care, we've both competed pretty heavily in Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone. I'm not going to say we were the best of the best, but we got legend every time we tried, and we've definitely top aided or won some middling Magic tournaments.
Yeah, credentials that would probably be more impressive with some, Pro Tour finishes or Hearthstone Cup qualifiers, but we'll look past that. I mean, it was competitive nonetheless. Before we jump into the episode, quick disclaimer: we have literally no clue what we're doing when it comes to podcasting, streaming, digital media, graphic design, content creation, anything like that, right? We're learning, but the production quality might not be so great for the first few episodes. I promise we'll get better. If you have any recommendations, let us know on the Discord or post a response or criticism or constructive feedback on the YouTube videos. That would be helpful.
Those are more impressive credentials we just laid down. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about our first impressions of Runeterra, what we did and did not like about it, and kind of how our first week went. What did we learn, and what are we going to change going forward about how we play the game.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's jump into it. So, what are your first impressions?
My first impressions were really positive, actually. I know we've both played a lot of card games, both physical and digital, and comparing it to the other digital card games, I liked it a lot. It's got that smooth polish of Hearthstone. It's really pretty, like Hearthstone was, but you can actually react to things. I should kind of lead with the disclaimer though that I am like a huge League of Legends addict. I've been battling that for 10 years, really unsuccessfully. So, like combining a card game with my favorite game of all time was there's a lot of bias there. Like I was probably going to feel pretty positively unless the game was just terrible.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. On a similar note, I did play League, but I haven't played it in, as you know, quite a while. It wasn't very good, which made it really easy for me to quit. Um, but I'm pretty far removed from their world and their lore. Um, Outside of like TFT, right? Like I played TFT, I got Diamond in TFT, but not a lot of feeling for world building in Teamfight Tactics, right? The auto battle genre kind of makes that hard.
Yeah.
But I will say, in terms of first impressions, I'm a big Riot fanboy. Even if I don't like League anymore, I still recognize the greatness that it is, right? The greatness that Riot as a company, what they've accomplished. They've changed legislation on sports visas, right? So
Yeah.
people are coming over on athletic visas to compete. That's huge for gaming in general, for the culture. Um, I'm a fan of their mechanics in most of their games. Like I said, even if I don't play League, I still recognize that it was, in my opinion, a good step in the right direction for that genre. Also, they made that board game X versus Minions. I think that was very well designed. And I think overall, from a first impression, I think Runeterra is one of the most gorgeous, polished, fun, if not digital card game, then card game that I've played in a very long time. So two thumbs up to them for that.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to perhaps talk about some things you liked specifically about the card game system itself?
Sure, yeah. The I think the system of priority was really big for me, right? Coming from all of these Not, I don't want to say non-interactive. That's a little negative. Less interactive card games, right? I'm looking at you, Hearthstone. Obviously, I played it for years, right? And there was a point in time where I loved it, and we both competed very heavy, right? We
Yeah.
even tried to start a podcast back then, and it was exhausting, and the burnout was really quick because the games, you know, removing interaction in the level of that Runeterra has, or in the level that Magic has, which is where we came from, the games are going to feel a lot more similar, right? There's gonna be a lot less. I think Riot actually said it the best in their unveiling. It was like playing multiplayer solitaire or something. I can't remember the
Yeah.
expression that they used, but you're solving for a one-sided puzzle essentially, and it was fun while I played it, and I'm sure plenty of people still have fun with it now. But I think from a mechanic system, I think the simple nature of passing priority has done wonders for a game, and it's very well implemented in this game. And cards interact with that system, I think, for the most part, well enough, with a few concerns that I have. But yeah, from a mechanic system, that's the biggest thing that I enjoyed. Um, Other than that, the game just feels smooth, right? It plays well and it's gorgeous. But yeah,
Definitely. Yeah, I think like I've been thinking about it for the past 9 or so days that it's been out at the time of this recording, and like having played Magic so much, that's always where my brain is. That's the first game I'm going to compare it to. So some things like not being able, like not getting priority back after I cast a fast spell in Runeterra to do another fast spell, um, was unintuitive to me at first. But I think thinking about it at this point, they've managed to make a really smooth system where you still have instant speed interaction, but it doesn't get bogged down like when you're playing a game of Magic Arena. And I think that's the difference. Like if we have to keep passing priority back and forth multiple times over a single spell or a combat step, then it's going to bog the game down. So they found this almost like magical formula where you still have this great interaction, but it's still really easy to play through. And once we kind of learn the kinks of the system, I think it's going to feel even better than it does now.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I think I agree with that. Maybe I'm just a little slow. It does feel a little weird to me that I don't entirely understand specifically combat and end of turn as it relates to burst spells. Not to
Yeah.
get too deep into the mechanics of the game for just a first impression segment, but I think that hits kind of on your statement where it's not particularly intuitive to pick up,
Yeah.
and it's just a thing that we'll get as we continue to play. Uh,
Yeah, but we've both been on Discord pretty much the whole time we've been playing this game, and so negative thoughts are bound to happen. What are kind of some of your biggest qualms with the system or the game in general you've run into?
so two things mainly, but the biggest thing, and I gave this a lot of thought, and we talked about it a lot, was how I feel about the economy system. And I know there's
Yeah,
rationale, I know there's a logic to why it is that way, but I don't like it. I think it's my biggest pet peeve from a game as a whole. It's not my biggest pet peeve from like a gameplay perspective, but it does have a big impact on how I'm playing the game and how players are consuming it, right?
yeah,
And there has to be some kind of catch up mechanic. Riot is their name is synonymous with esports, right? Like there was no people really didn't follow WoW arenas anymore, and the CS:GO community or the CS Source or 1.6 community, there was communities out there, but nothing to the scale of League of Legends, right? So they understand the nature of competition, and the current model presented doesn't seem feasible. And maybe there's some documentation somewhere or an interview that I missed that says that they have a plan to address this. But right now, I don't see if they announce a tournament 4 months from now and a bunch of people want to get into it 3 months from now, but they haven't been playing since it came out. It feels like they're going to be very far behind in their collection, and that scares me a little unless I hear or read that there is definitively some kind of catch up mechanic.
Yeah, that's fair. I haven't read anything that definitively says there is a catch-up mechanic. And I kind of share your concerns, obviously. I started playing Magic in 2010 or something, which was at this point a long time ago, but realistically, that was like what, 17 years into the game's existence or something. Like,
Yeah.
I've never played a card game that was like I'm trying to give them money for cards, and they were like, no. Yeah, that's a really weird system to me. Hearthstone really encouraged you spending a lot of money with every choice they made over the years. Like, there's more legendaries and sets, and
Yep.
all of a sudden classes had two legendaries and stuff, and like there was meme legendaries because I like to brew, which that's true in this game too. Like I've kind of held off on using my wild cards on the meme cards because you get so few of them that I'm like worried about it. I need to play the good decks.
That makes
But
all of us.
well, yeah, I know you're a little more trigger happy than I am. Um, but I don't. There has to be something at some point, right? Like maybe the next expansion comes out and that gets people excited to play the game. Like they have to offer just literally like anything. It would be good, right? But like hopefully a more concrete plan where if I want to introduce my friend 2 years from now who's looking for a card game, I can say, hey, yeah, like you can jump in here and it'll be easy to start building decks. Not, well, you got to grind for 2 years of cards that I've already had, so
Yeah. Yeah.
like, you better start now.
It's definitely my concern. Yeah.
I mean, it's um, yeah. I mean, you've definitely echoed that sentiment to me. Is there anything actually like gameplay related that you've been annoyed with, or is it really just the overall economy structure at this point?
Annoyed. I wouldn't say annoyed is the right
Sure.
word. I do think the game, and you hit on this a little earlier. It's not an intuitive game to pick up, and I think, while I personally don't have anything wrong with it, I think it deters some people from picking it up.
Yeah.
I think it deters some people from wanting to dig deeper. But for me personally, I think burst. I don't think that's a healthy mechanic. I don't think I wasn't a fan of split second in Magic. I'm not a fan of a forced lack of interaction. We have cards like Deny. I don't think, I think I should be able to use cards like Deny on everything. I think I should be able to use I think everything should be fast. I don't understand why burst exists. Um, even if we're not talking Deny, it might be a bad
Yeah.
example. I may have made a lot of enemies just now, uh, but
As you should. The Ionia scum faction.
I, yeah, yeah, I think versus is an unhealthy mechanic, or yeah, versus is an unhealthy mechanic. I don't really understand. They have a team of smart designers. I'm not sure. Maybe there's some rationale. I mean, I'm only like, most of my opponents are low plat right now. I haven't really spent the time to grind very high. Um, Maybe there's a reason at higher elos why. Maybe it'll be revealed to me later on why it is the way that it is.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what surprises me the most about Burst, because I actually do agree with you. Like my thoughts on Denied aside, like I don't know that Burst is the way to make Deny worse if that was their goal. And at the very least, the lead designer is a very seasoned Magic player, and they've also like knowingly consulted with other Magic pros. I'm surprised that Split Second is, which is basically what Burst is for our listeners who don't play Magic, is a mechanic where it feels like there's no counterplay, right? Like one of the first things I read within maybe 3 days was someone saying, back to back is the best card in Legends of Runeterra. I thought that was ridiculous. Obviously, like from a Magic background, like this is a combat trick. It's not even permanent like a lot of these buffs are. But I mean, after playing with them more, I still don't believe that is true. But it is a lot better than I gave it credit for. It's like you force these blocks, or you get to block, and all of a sudden you're playing this huge pump spell on multiple minions, and a lot of damage or a lot of removal in this game is damage based, right?
Yeah.
Like the And I think we've started to see kind of people adjust to this by like playing Frostbite cards where they weren't played a lot in the beginning, and it's because you just can't kill these things with Mystic Shots and stuff when they have burst speed pump spells. So you need to find other ways, and Vengeance being 7 mana is like too much for that. So I think I'll definitely say it's weird how good pump spells appear to be in this game. Like
Yeah.
I was watching Zixo stream this morning, and he was talking about how against control decks he wanted to keep Mark of the Ephemeral in his aggro deck. Like he wanted to mulligan. He didn't have any creatures he wanted. He was like, I need to just keep this like giant growth though. This is the best card in the matchup. And in my mind,
Yeah.
I'm like how is this possible? Like what's going on in this system that I don't understand yet? Where
Yeah.
like that's true because
Yeah.
that's crazy to me, to be honest.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting how a lot of our fundamental card evaluation strategy, and this was true in other games that we've played as well, right? Force of Will, Magic, all those other games that we played, um, where it's like your face keeps getting so huge and changing. Slight technical difficulty here. Yeah, it's hard to evaluate cards across those card games, um,
Yeah.
comparatively to Legends of Runeterra, where cards that I thought all pump spells were going to be trash, right? And
Right.
like you said, it's that's pretty much where we're at right now with Legends of Runeterra, where the effective removal, the effective strategies for counter removal, it's all damage based pump spells or frostbite effects, and that's if you were to tell me that that was the case when we were playing Magic, I just wouldn't believe you, right?
Yeah.
Or Forcible, I couldn't believe you. That's a silly concept, coming from other games. So it's one of those paradigm shifts, right, where we have to accept that we are playing a different game, and it's taking a little longer to kind of acquiesce to this new world. Although I think we're doing fine, right? Like you're kind of an
Yeah.
expedition master with a ton of 7-0s, and we haven't really played ranked very much, and we're cruising along just fine, right? So I think we're doing an okay job acquiescing, but there is that weird learning curve where things just don't feel like they should exist the way they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me at least, most of it's been in deck building more than gameplay. Like I can take a deck from someone's stream, and play it, and like play the cards in the right order and have good results. It's just when I'm building my own decks, I wouldn't look at Mark of the Ephemeral and say, well, I mean, this is a 3F. Like this is the card that's going to kill control.
Yeah,
It's like a giant growth with downside. It kills your guy at the end of the turn. So um, I agree. There's definitely going to be a learning curve here, and it's just something we'll get more used to over time.
yeah,
But I mean, I thought that way with back to back, but I net decked enough lists with back to back where I'm like, yep, actually every time I cast this, it's insane. There's like no playing around it unless your opponent has their own back to back, and I don't know, it's just kind of nuts.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I also kind of scoffed when I read that. I mean, it was Reddit, right?
Yeah,
It was like one of the first Masters players or something, saying um, that they got to Masters playing this deck, and they said, when somebody asked about back to back, this is clearly the best card in Legends of Runeterra, and both of us kind of took a step back, and we were like, who is this guy, right? Like, why?
right. Yeah, yeah.
And then as we played, and some other competitive players that I follow, I started watching their social feeds, and they were saying the same thing, right? Like the tempo swing is just insane. Back to back is crazy. It somebody Jeff Jones, right, Yu-Gi-Oh player. I was reading a Facebook post that he made, and he said something about the tempo swing makes it so players can't catch up, right? Like when he resolves it, and he has creatures left at the end of combat, and his opponent doesn't. It's very hard for opponents to catch up if they're not playing cards like Ruination.
Yeah,
So I mean,
which
and that makes sense.
yeah, I mean even Ruination. So I guess this gets into game mechanics a little. It's like Ruination costs so much mana, right? And I think it's because of spell mana. You can't have that effect cost 7 because then it's a turn 4 play after someone banks 3 mana from their last turn.
Yeah.
But because these spells, some of these like catch up spells like Vengeance and Ruination, like the really hard removal spells, are so expensive, it it becomes hard to weave those into a turn organically. And it felt like after maybe the first 4 days, like I wasn't blowing anyone out with Ruination anymore. Like they wouldn't just spend their mana and then pass to me, and like I would pass back with 9 mana, and they're like, "Oh, this guy has nothing. Like I'm gonna play 5 more mana worth of creatures," and I'm like, "Okay, well now a Ruination at the end of my turn, or whatever." Like
Yeah.
people have really started to learn about the priority system, which is kind of speaking to the unintuitive nature of it again, where it's once you get ahead on board, it feels a lot easier to use priority to your advantage than
Yeah.
it is when you're behind.
Yeah.
And I've been playing a lot of these control decks, like first the Shadow Isles ones, and then the Heimer Ezreal ones lately. And it feels really stressful from that side, where you're always behind, and you have to decide like when can I spend all my mana and not just get like really punished here. It's a skill set that I feel like will have to be learned.
Yep.
But I guess as far as my actual biggest qualm goes, it's pretty easy to narrow it down to like one thing specifically. It's every card from Ionia,
I
pretty
see.
much. um, Obviously, that's not true. It's just all the ones that are played. Because the ones that aren't
I
played.
love Ionia. I'm in a minority where I don't think elusive is too
I mean,
problematic. I don't think deny is too problematic.
it's weird because I don't. The way the meta is shaping up, deny doesn't seem to be that problematic, but I almost wonder if that's part of the reason why burst spells have gotten so popular. It's like Ionia is one of the best regions, it feels like, in a vacuum at least. Like it's even if they end up not being the best, it feels like they're dictating the pace of the meta more than anyone else.
Sure, that might be true.
Because like people have to react to elusive and have to acknowledge the fact that deny exists. I can say trying to resolve a lot of ruinations in my time so far, you have to acknowledge that deny exists.
Yeah.
Um, is really my problem with it is the faction feels non-interactive. Like the way the decks actually play out, it's like the elusive minions are probably all. It's like a fine concept, but they end up just like erasing you the whole time and trying to throw up small roadblocks while they kill you with chip damage creatures. And a lot of times it's awkward because their decks have evolved with the meta just like everyone else's, and
Yeah.
so at first you could play challenger minions and kind of go after them, and I think that's still true with Fiora decks specifically, but
For the most part, yeah.
yeah. But I mean they're all playing pump spells now too, and
Yeah.
so you play a challenger minion, you spend your mana, and you're like, well, I have to try to kill their guy, and then they spend their mana for that turn playing a pump spell, and so like you go nowhere basically, and then they hit you for some more damage on their turn,
Ionia by
and
itself, though, to be fair, doesn't have that many pump spells, right? So it depends on the splash region that they're in.
it does, but I feel like Ionia Demacia is one of the bigger Ionia decks. Maybe I don't know. I'm trying to think what I've been playing against most lately. It's probably either that or
I see
Freljord.
Freljord a lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
I see a lot of Freljord. Omen Hawks synergize with the Inspiring Mentor on your conspirators for bouncing shenanigans, and there's a lot of the Frostbite, 1 mana Brittle Steel,
yeah,
and the 0/2 elixir, right? So there
yeah,
isn't really much that offers you. Obviously, if you're in Demacia, you gain access to back to back, which is huge.
yeah.
Um,
Standalone sometimes.
Standalone, yeah, sometimes. But I will say I'm a little disappointed. I don't know. It's exciting to watch metas develop, and this is a bit of a digression on the topic that we're just talking about, but it's a bit disappointing to see how the meta has shifted. Right when you first look at the pool of cards, I'm excited to see Shen Fiora decks, right? And
Yeah,
it's just not the way that Fiora's played. Fiora's played because she is an efficient 3/3 4-3 with Challenger, right? The alternate win condition really isn't being leveraged. I mean, you can squeak out a game if you're playing Judgment pretty
Yeah.
easily, right? But for the most part, that's not what your deck is doing these days. I mean, some people still might be playing Shen Fiora. I've definitely seen some people play old school Fiora decks that are doing that. It's funny to say old school now. The game's been out for like 9 days, but I mean, the meta has been shifting aggressively, which is exciting, and I
Yeah.
think that's by design, right? Like Riot has acknowledged that they are, slowly releasing, forcing this weird economy structure to kind of help the meta develop slower, and
Yeah.
that appears to be working. Tuesday will come. A lot more people will have access to a lot more cards, and we're going to see a lot more interesting takes on decks. Um, it's getting rarer and rarer that we see brand new brews.
Yeah.
They still exist, obviously. They're not as common. Most of the time, it's a new take on an old deck, which makes sense. That's going to happen as the meta progresses. I'm excited to see the first tournament, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm really excited to see how them and as we know, you and I and some of the other competitor players and some of the other people who just watch esports and card games in general might know. Your ladder decks aren't the same decks you see in tournaments, right? Depends on the format of the tournament, right?
Yeah.
Hearthstone had Last Man Standing. Arena has, well, I don't even know what Arena's doing these days. I don't know if sideboards are still a thing anymore with the decks, deck changing. But
Yeah, they've, I think, been forced into it by popular demand. And that Magic players weren't ready to change like a structural format like that yet.
yeah, yeah. But in general, watching, I'm curious to know what those lists are going to look like what those tournament decks are going to look like, and there
Yeah.
will obviously be a heavy influence from ladder because that's where most of the people are going to get their experience from. Whoever's playing in these events, that's where most of their experience is gonna originate from. It's ladder. It's that probably not thousand, hundreds of games of ladder grinding. So yeah, we'll see how that shapes up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It sounds a little ridiculous to say the old meta, but you could almost see like, if not three, then two very distinct metas so far. Where like the game comes out on Friday, and you can buy like your first week wild cards, and there's been no vault yet. So there's like a Friday through Monday night meta where you see a lot of decks that aren't champion based because people just don't have them, right?
Yeah.
You see like Shadow Isle Control, that like maybe it plays the two Elises that your account comes with
Yeah, yeah.
because it's a 2/3 for two. That's pretty good. And you see like the elusive aggro decks that also aren't that champion reliant. They're probably playing the two Zeds your account comes with, stuff
Yeah.
like that. Maybe even elites in that category where, again, not very champion focused. Um, but like as Tuesday hit and sort of as the week has gone by and people have refined their lists, like I've played against way more Fiora this week than I did those first 4 days, right?
Hmm.
Or like the Zekrom decks, like people had the Zeds but they didn't have the Hekroms yet, and then you kind of play against that stuff now. So, or even Heimer Israel, that's something I didn't see definitely until people got a refresh on their wild cards because neither of those champions comes on your account by default.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I think it's possible that people have spent a lot of their wild cards kind of playing the decks that streamers were playing for the most part, and a lot of streamers were playing Fiora in my experience. And we get into the next week, and maybe the meta shifts again. Yeah, maybe like I haven't played against literally a single Ashe or Vladimir. Do I think they're particularly good? Probably not, but we don't know that for sure. And we might see like a meta shift, like maybe Lucian aggro becomes a thing or something along those lines.
I've actually played quite a bit against Ashe. Actually, there's a
Really?
lot of Freljord control decks that are really leveraging frostbite strategies, and Ashe is usually in there paired up with a Tryndamere sometimes. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's also something I think is interesting. As I've been climbing the ranks, I don't know why this is the case, but I noticed that there's certain archetypes of decks that I played against at certain elos, and this could be coincidence. I don't have any data to back this up, but I feel like from iron to like silver, I played the same decks,
Yeah.
and then as I got to like high silver to gold, I played different decks. And now that my opponents are almost exclusively plat 4 gold 1, they're almost always playing either tempo elusive decks or Dawn Spiders.
Yeah.
And the every once in a while I play against a Ezreal Heimerdinger control deck, and then the other control decks are typically Freljord, and a lot of them play Ash. But not always, but a lot of sometimes they do.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's just like even though I've had problems with some of the decks that have popped up, I don't think we've seen the end of the meta shifting. And
Yeah, definitely.
I know you don't like the economy, and I actually agree with you as someone who wants to spend a lot of money on the game and just like brew up all my terrible decks. And
Yeah.
most involve Elnux, but that doesn't matter. Um, it's like that is what Riot stated was their goal, right? Like they wanted people to basically like, they don't want the meta to get solved very quickly, and they forced this like very arbitrary progression cap on you. And regardless of if we like it or not, it does seem to be working towards their intended goal.
Yeah, no, I mean I agree with that working, right? It does
Yeah.
work. You know, it is what it is. I have to accept it. And like I said, it is kind of exciting, right? Like, and I hope they can keep it up. My concern maybe is how many more vaults before everybody kind of has everything, you
Right.
know. So, and I know they plan on releasing content, um, patches fairly regularly, like kind of League of Legends style.
Yeah.
And I hope I hope they do. And I hope it keeps being fresh. I want new takes on decks to exist every vault day, right? Every vault day that comes out, alongside their content patches, there's a reason for me to continuously want to play, right? Because right now, let's say I hit master, um, or challenger, right? And there's, we also don't know what their competitive scene looks like, right? In Hearthstone, you had to keep the grind up, right? You had to go for high legend every season because it gave you points for a cumulative season.
Yeah.
We don't have any information on what the competitive scene looks like in Legends of Runeterra yet, so it's possible I'll have to play for other reasons. I kind of hope that's not the point. How they go about it. Hearthstone was really exhausting in that way. Even Arena's system was a lot better, right? Top 750 Mythic gets invited to a giant playoff event over a weekend, and then they narrow that down. Like that felt more manageable.
Yeah, it's these days I believe it's once every 2 months you need to finish top 1200 to
Yeah,
play in that tournament. So
yeah,
it's definitely reasonable. You do have to spend a month playing a lot,
yeah.
like by like a casual standard.
But
But
that's
I
a lot.
agree
It's
with
still
you.
a lot easier than Hearthstone though, where you had to fight for because yeah, you got 1 point for becoming a legend in Hearthstone, but that
Yeah,
wasn't enough to qualify for anything, right? You wanted first place, right? There was actually a huge point discrepancy from first and the rest, right?
yep,
Top 50 was decent, top 25, right? You actually wanted to continually ladder grind because people are playing until the season literally ends, right? That second where they close the season, um, which were months,
yeah,
is that people are grinding up to the very last second, so your ranking is changing, right? It was exhausting. It was frustrating. And I think Arena did a good job solving that. I'm very curious to know how Legends of Runeterra approaches it.
yeah. I hope it's not like Hearthstone. At least not the exact thing. I remember when we set out to grind Hearthstone really competitively. On the last day of the first month we were doing it, like I wasn't that high. I was top 100, but I didn't want to risk my rank because there was a couple more months in that season, and but it closed on like West Coast time, and we're East Coast, and
Right.
so like
Yeah.
I had to go to work the next morning, and I was waking up at like 5:30. But like every hour, I set an alarm, wake up, log into Hearthstone. I'm like, okay, I haven't dropped. I'm like 79th or something. Like I can go
Yeah.
back to sleep for an hour. And
Yeah.
I mean, it sucked. It's not. It didn't feel healthy, or at the very least, it was very stressful.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of hope that there's tournaments in Runeterra. Like if there's going to be a competitive scene, I would like to be able to qualify through doing well in an individual tournament, at least as one avenue. Like maybe
Yeah.
you have to have ladder grinding as part of it,
Yeah.
or another avenue in, because realistically, that's what we're all going to spend most of our time doing. But
Yeah. And there were pros and cons, right? I don't want to bash on Hearthstone too much. I will say, anecdotally, right? Back in the day, now I've been playing card games, Magic specifically, for quite a while.
yeah,
Back in the day, uh, there was a original old school Elo system, and there was article one time that said the average like elo of a player on the pro tour was only like 18, 1900, right?
Yeah.
Which objectively isn't a very small percentage, right? It's a top percentile. But
Yeah.
I remember watching pro tour coverage and seeing, no disrespect to any of the people in the pro tour, but very like subpar or obvious mistakes because who knows why, right? But
Yeah.
what I did realize, and this could be, like I said, this could be a combination of many factors, right? Magic is a more complicated game than Hearthstone. I get this, but my theory, my working theory is it requires so much effort and so many games played to qualify for these Hearthstone Cups, these
Yeah.
championship cups, right? Where you literally are playing against hundreds of thousands of people in your respective region, and it gets whittled down to 4 people, right?
Yeah.
So by the time you're watching the Hearthstone Championships, you're seeing people who have played a nauseating amount of games
That's true.
because it is effort based in addition to skill, um, and that it made it more fun to watch. It made it so, if Stan Sisko was making a play and I didn't agree with it, in my mind, and this could have been a logical fallacy, right? Appeal to authority. I
Yeah.
just assumed he was right.
Right.
Whereas watching old school Pro Tour coverage, people, people that I knew personally would make plays. I would question it, and then when I saw them in person, they would say, "Yeah, it wasn't the best play. I really wasn't sure." Blah 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 blah. That didn't exist in Hearthstone, right?
Yeah.
It just people were playing so many games so frequently. You see all the states that could possibly exist. I mean, even when we played, we were averaging close to 1,000 games a season,
Yeah. I mean,
and the Hearthstone round, qualifying round thing was three seasons long combined. So I mean, the average person in the HCQ or whatever, they were playing well, close to 5,000 games per event. It was insane.
yeah. I feel like there has to be a healthy middle ground there somewhere because like there's definitely a number of games where you're well practiced and aren't making very many mistakes that comes well before like the 5,000
Sure,
mark, you know?
I
Like,
agree with that. Yeah, yeah. And that's why I
uh,
think Arena did a good job, right? Like
yeah.
I think that number is attainable, right? That legend number, 1,200, you said, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a very reasonable number. It's still hard to get, and it's still a lot of effort in there. But you're playing a good amount of games to get there, and you're gonna see, in their Arena championships, you're gonna see high quality levels of play. Um,
Yeah.
and good for them, and it's really fun to watch. And so I think that's a healthy middle ground. But like you said, to echo your sentiment, I would like to see more avenues of qualification. I think so. This is something interesting, and this is just kind of a continual digression to what we were talking about. But I uh, I found that the information to qualify for the Hearthstone events was so incredibly difficult to find.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I mean, you haven't been playing as much Magic lately, but it's to the point where I've kind of given up on the competitive Magic dream, literally because I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't know how to even become a pro Magic player these days. And
Yeah,
if you read a series of very lengthy articles and like look up what all these terms actually mean, you can figure it out. But I agree. I hope it's a little more clear if that ever comes to being in Runeterra.
yeah. I remember you and I parsing through the rules for the Hearthstone qualifications, and it was, like a 24-page PDF that they sent, and we had to look up so much. And it's like if you want people to compete in your game, make it simple, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day, this is old school. To
Yeah.
be a Magic Pro, all you had to do was win a PTQ, right?
Yeah.
Granted, that meant some people slipped in that probably didn't belong there,
Yeah.
but everybody understood the system. And I'm not sure it's too difficult to create a system that everybody understands that's in the middle ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
I I agree, and I probably echo the sentiment that not everyone who played in every Pro Tour back then necessarily belonged if you're just looking for the best players, but it was also kind of cool back in the day. And even when I started playing, is you could win a PTQ or you could go 13 and 2 at a GP to get on the Pro Tour. It was like you kind of like chasing that dream, Like
Yeah.
I can be a guy that just does well at FNM sometimes, but I decide I was ready to shell out the $40 and play in a PTQ, and if I ran hot, then I could play in a pro tour. Maybe that's the highlight of my entire career, but you could do it. You just have one good day, and it can happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's cool, if nothing else.
There was also a point where you can qualify off of rating.
Yeah.
That was actually for quite a while. You can do that. But that introduced a whole different series of issues, right? Where people were protecting their elo by creating separate accounts, which was against the terms of service, right? So there's a whole separate issue with that. But either way, there were ways to qualify to become a professional and play at the highest level of competition, and we all knew how to do it. And that just isn't the case with modern games, it appears. Although Arena seems to be good, or everybody understands what to do with Arena, which is great.
Yeah.
We need more of that, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like the initial qualification is pretty simple. Like, I think where it gets lost in Magic these days is just where does that get you? Basically, like being a quote unquote pro is something entirely separate. But
yeah. All right. Well, let's segue into our next topic, our kind of week in review, right? So,
yeah.
How'd your first week go? What'd you spend your first week doing? What'd you learn? How do you feel?
Yeah, so when we were talking about what we wanted to do in this episode, at the time I had been really conservative. I hadn't spent any money on the game, and I hadn't really used any of my wild cards. At a certain point, I got tired of my ruinations getting denied, and I needed to play a different deck. So I just went ahead and dropped in $100, which apparently is going to last me for weeks and weeks and weeks because I made no dent in that. Like I didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah, ditto.
But I decided to fully craft like the Heimerdinger Ezreal deck minus one Heimerdinger that I didn't have a wild card for. I had a lot of fun with that. That was actually the first kind of like a real deck I played outside of Shadow Isles Control. So I guess my first week was mostly spent. I've just been like grinding expeditions, and I've been doing pretty well in that. And every one that you get real rewards for, I've had 7 wins. That's kind of how I planned on building my collection. I haven't hit the ranked ladder too hard at this point, mostly because it doesn't feel like it would be cool to have the prestige of being really high really early on. I almost feel like at this point there's people hitting masters kind of consistently, so I missed the boat, and it's just like there's no real reward. I can just kind of play with you and like test decks or like spectate you playing games and get the same amount of enjoyment out of it at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, there is no real reason yet. Nothing's been announced. No rewards have been announced other than 7 icons that aren't in the game yet.
True.
I think they said so. Yeah, I don't know.
It might lend credibility to our podcast. That could be relevant. But, people just have to take my word that I win all our playtest games, so I must be nuts.
So yeah, what did you learn, right? How do you feel about your first week? And
yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, or pump spells, and I think the big thing is I'm still learning a lot, is like about the game itself. One, half the time, maybe less than half time. Sometimes I just forget when I'm actually going to have priority. Like, I don't know that's like how it's not something I've already learned, but
I feel you.
apparently I haven't. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm going to get them once I get priority back, and then combat resolves. I'm like, well, in my mind, this play was going to be nice. But yeah, so like I'm still learning the ins and outs of the system. Kind of when you're free to do stuff. Like I feel like the first lesson I learned in the game was like, it's turn 7. We're not trading with Shadow Isles creatures anymore until he goes less than 7 real mana, so he can't Raza me. Right.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a very brutal lesson at first, and then people were kind of like, okay, like Raza's a real card. We need to stop doing this, like trading. So my board's just my 5/5 and my 8/8. But
Yeah.
I think outside of the actual game itself, I learned kind of how the economy is going to work. Like I didn't, like we were curious about catch-up mechanics, and so part of the reason I didn't spend money at first is I wanted to see week 2, would I have double the amount of wild cards in my store that you
Yeah.
did? The answer is no. For anyone
Yeah.
who's
Good. Good
curious,
test. Yeah.
I'm
Good
just
test.
down 3 champions from everyone else. But like I did some like math that probably could have just been common sensed out, but I did the math anyway and figured out that it's actually better to like level your regions up simultaneously and hit the good breakpoints. To anyone out there, I would recommend getting every single region to level 8 before moving on in any of them. I think it's the easiest way to get 6 random champions really quickly. And I've learned that you're really going to do well in your expeditions because the difference between 6 wins and 7 wins is gigantic.
It's
It's
huge. Yeah.
2,000 shards, which goes from a net positive to like a huge net loss, which I mean is fair. The expeditions are pretty generous in how many losses they give you, and
How does
you
that
get 2
math work
draws.
out? The discrepancy between 6 and 7, 2,000 shards. How does that math work out?
So it's just, when you get 6 wins, I believe you get a champion capsule,
1,500
or
XP.
yeah, and I believe you get 1,500 shards as well. But if you get 7 wins, you get the champion capsule and you get 2,000 XP and 3,500 shards. Which, if you
Wow.
enter using shards, is you actually net gain 500 from getting 7 wins.
Yeah.
So I'm up a lot of shards in my account right now because I haven't been spending them. But
I
if you're not doing well, it's bad.
so I have a lot of wins. I'm not as good as expedition as you are. I have 1 or 2 7 wins and mainly 6 wins. But as you can see, I'm sharing my Legends of Runeterra client right now. I have 200 shards, so I'm not shard rich like you are. Uh, but
Well, you have a lot
I
more
spend them
decks
all.
than I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I spend them all recklessly, and I play a lot of trash decks. I'll say this: if you're not a serious player and you're not concerned about getting master and you just want to have fun, I don't know what your personal goals are, but you can pretty much get to mid to high gold, almost plat, literally playing whatever you want. I played a very trash Yasuo deck pretty much exclusively from iron to like low gold, and I probably could have pulled out a few more wins, but I was getting really frustrated with tempo elusive, so I ended up playing tempo elusive decks,
Yeah.
and that was a lot more beneficial for me. But you can play whatever you want, including meme stun recall decks, and you can get there. Just blow all your wild shards, your wild cards and your shards.
Yeah, I would say if your goals are the same as Medina's, maybe don't do that because he spent that Friday to Tuesday period really frustrated that his only deck was Yasuo. So
Yeah. Okay. So
if you really want to play Yasuo, that's fine. If you really want to climb, maybe don't.
all right. So my biggest issue, obviously, with economy, right? Not to backpedal,
Yeah.
but or go backwards, but the economy, I get its purpose, but for a person who plays as much as I would like to play, obviously we both have full time jobs, we can't play as much as we'd like to, but we
Yeah.
still manage to play quite a decent bit off of work, and so we're not playing nearly as much as the streamers are, and even myself, I am tired of playing with the same collection, right?
Yeah.
Being so restricted. So I did. Tuesday came out, and I think by Thursday or maybe even Wednesday, I had blown all my shards and wild cards, and I was like, "This is fine." When I did it, when I used them, I said to myself, "This is fine. I could play this new deck or make new decks leveraging the cards that I just created for the next week." Vault
Yeah.
Tuesday will come out, and I'll be able to do it again. That wasn't the case for me, man. After like I don't know, my 100th game or so, I felt sick of playing. I don't even remember. I think it was old school Fiora. So Shen
Yeah.
Fiora
Sure.
barrier. It was fun, right? And you get a lot of gimmicky, cheesy wins, and
At the time, you were having a lot of fun.
I
When you
was
first
having a
crafted
lot of
it, you
fun.
were like, "This is the most fun deck that I've played." Like, not close.
That's true, but
Then the 100 games later, here we
yeah, I
are.
was just tired of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't even know what I'm playing now, so it doesn't even matter. But yeah, the economy is frustrating.
I mean, I get that. It's weird. Like, I'm not as restricted as I feel like I am. Like, at the end of the day, I look at my account right now. I have a champion wild card, like 3 epics and 15 rares and commons or whatever, on top of 15,000 shards. So I could build a new deck if I wanted to, but in my mind, I'm like, oh man, like if I commit to something and I don't like it, like the store doesn't reset for a week, so then I'm going to be another Medina. Like that's not fun. So I just sit here every week playing those like same two decks I have.
Yeah. All right. Well, so highlights for me. I mean, I didn't play nearly as many expeditions as you did. I played absolutely what I had to for champion capsules. I don't enjoy it. I think it's too much of a time sink. It's fun. Okay, I enjoy is the wrong word. Um, I think it's a huge time commitment, and
Yeah.
giving you the ability to come back is very generous, right? Giving you the ability to not drop out when you unless you lose two in a row. Very, I think it's a well designed system. I don't think it's a system for me. I'm not a fan of I don't know what we're calling it these days, bucket drafting, pod drafting, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. I'm not a fan of it. Just in general, I would rather play constructed. I guess at the end of the day,
Sure.
it has its pros, right? It's limited, right? So the typical pros of a limited format, you get to experience cards that you might not play with. Cards are evaluated differently. A card like War Chefs might be amazing and limited, and just okay in
And
constructed.
constructed. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm not.
Don't-
Yeah,
I was just saying, don't sleep on the shifts,
I'm not sleeping on them. I play them.
especially in expedition.
Yeah, an expedition, no, right? So I get it, right? And it's fun for what it is, but it is a huge time sink, especially when you need ideally to maximize your account. You need 7 wins twice in each trial, 3 trials a week, right?
Yeah, I mean
That's exhausting. That's a lot of time.
the good news is, let's say you're only getting to 6 or even 5 wins. If you don't have a very specific deck in mind that you'd like to build, that's still it's kind of profitable, right? Because when you enter an expedition, you're always getting a random champion,
Yeah,
and you're entering for the cost of crafting a singular champion in your collection. So if your main goal is to get everything, then expeditions are still the most efficient way to do it, even if you aren't rattling off 7 wins.
yeah,
But I agree, right now, everyone's we have so little that we're trying to build specific decks, and it
yeah,
feels a little frustrating.
yeah. No, I agree. But yeah. Overall, I mean, I would pretty much echo your sentiments. I think we learned pretty much the same things. I mean, we communicate frequently on Discord, while we're playing. So I think most of our, I wouldn't say it's an echo chamber, but I think critically we pretty much agree on everything, with the exception of Ionia Master Race, and you have a lot of hate. But
Shadow Isles is clearly the most unique and fun region in the game. It's the only one not just playing vanilla minions and attacking.
agree to disagree.
Mostly disagree.
Okay. So yeah, I guess my final thoughts were outside of a couple cards, and that's more of a game balance issue that I think will be addressed. I have a lot of faith in Riot. They know what they're doing as a company, and the team that they've assembled for Legends of Runeterra also seems very competent. So until I'm proven otherwise, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. So outside of a couple of cards, I feel very good about the game so far. I think Commander Ladros has either a typo or there's a mathematical rounding error in there. I don't know what's going on, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how far we are into the episode. I'm impressed that you haven't mentioned his name once yet. There's every time I get annoyed about my ruination getting denied, like just as many times I can hear Medina going like, "What is up with this rounding error? Like, why does he always round up?"
I don't understand it. It's very frustrating. I've lost a lot of games to that rounding error, right? To the net
It's
loss
a
of
feature,
1 or 2x. Yeah,
not a
well,
bug.
it's something. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? What are your final thoughts for the week?
Final thoughts for the week are still scared to spend on the economy, but I enjoyed the game a lot. I was actually like prepping for a relatively big Magic tournament this week, and instead of like doing that seriously, I really got sucked into playing Runeterra for the most part.
That
Um,
sounded like me with work.
yeah, so I mean, also you can throw work into that, so
Yeah.
that's fine. But yeah, I liked it a lot. I'm excited about kind of the prospects this game brings. I feel like based on the articles I've read, and I don't know what Riot's actual plan is, that this might actually be the biggest dry period because right now it just went into open beta. and they're trying to fix a lot of things before they focus on releasing content, from what I've heard.
Hmm.
So I think if we get through this, it sounds like they have some exciting things in the works, and I think we're going to get through this by our collection slowly building over time, and maybe that's another part of their plan. Like
Yeah, makes
we
sense.
like we have to we'll keep coming back because every week we can finally build a new deck. You know,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
really want to play Jinx Draven, for example.
me too. We have, yeah, that happens a lot too. So yeah, let's we're gonna wrap it up here. This is our last segment of the podcast where we're just kind of talk about, and it's a quick grocery list. It's not nothing we're gonna spend too much time on, but this is essentially our future goals for the podcast, right? For our brand, for the Bad Mage group, right? We're working on a lot of content. We're figuring out how to structure these podcasts more so they're focused, right? A lot of the conversations here today probably had some rants that weren't appropriate for what we were talking about. I still had fun talking about them, but they're going to be a little more structured in the content we're providing, right? We might have some meta breakdowns, some statistics, some news, right? When we get kind of an official news outlet outside of just Riot's website or the Legends of Runeterra website, maybe we'll start aggregating things that happen on Reddit and kind of talking over that. We're going to be doing some streaming in the future. We'll still have these on YouTube, but they'll probably also be live streamed, and we can have viewer interactions on them. I would like to get a Bad Mage Baddie League tournament for Legends of Runeterra, which is something that we've tried to do for quite a lot of other games. It's essentially just a multi-week tournament. The structure doesn't really matter. It's essentially a tournament. We want to run a tournament, right? Yeah. It doesn't really matter what the structure is, but those are kind of the goals. Also, to get better at our production, because as I'm sure you're seeing, the videos were changing and disconnecting. The audio might not sound great. So we're going to be working on a lot of that in the upcoming future.
Yeah, I think as we move forward, expect our streams to kind of be linked below in the description on YouTube. But yeah, man, I think we have some content that I'm really excited for. I want to make YouTube videos outside of this. We've talked about it a little bit, kind of some meta decks versus each other and talking through some of the lines of play. Hopefully, as we get better at those decks, so that people actually glean something from those sessions.
Gain value from it, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit more, I guess, comparatively to what people might be familiar with what we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think the most direct comparison would be anyone who's familiar with Magic and I assume I'm allowed to say their names, Star City Games. They do Versus Live, where they will take a day. These days it's actually on Twitch. We could do that where they interact with the chat a little bit, but they basically play either hot new decks or maybe some theoretical decks as a set is coming out, and they play them versus each other. They're very high level players and kind of break down their thoughts, regardless of the fact that their opponent can hear them, because the main goal is for kind of people to learn about these decks and the lines of play, and perhaps why a professional or semi-professional player is making those plays to see if you agree with them.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen much content like that for digital card games, but I think it's something I'm excited to do, with you, or maybe as we expand the Bad Mage network a little bit, then with other people maybe, as well.
Yeah. Popular streamers interested. I'd like to see if they want to be involved. That would be cool. I imagine there's some kind of technical complexities, which is why we haven't seen it done with other games. But I don't think it's anything we can't solve for, right? While I'm not familiar with streaming technology, graphic design, media, all that stuff, I am in the IT industry, so I can tell just with the little that we've done to get this up and running that it's definitely within the realm of possibility to do, and quite easy for somebody who's proficient with it, right? So it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to as well to do. So hopefully we can get that up and running pretty soon. That would be pretty fun, especially since we've been playing since the game came out, this beta wave, and our collections are getting there. You have a meta. I mean, we both have meta decks.
Yeah.
You know, we could, in theory, start as soon as we figure out our schedules and the technology behind it. So that would be pretty cool to do.
Yeah. I guess if we're allowed to make blanket statements based on our profession, yeah, I'm in accounting. I can tell you for the Bad Mage Baddie League, yeah, we'll probably be giving out some credit towards Runeterra. I don't know if they're selling those as gift cards yet or not, but we'll figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
you got to get people excited about some Bad Mage content.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, we're definitely going to be doing giveaways and all that stuff. So we have a lot of stuff in the pipeline. We're still getting organized, but we wanted to get the first podcast episode filmed, recorded, and pushed out to you guys. So get your feedback, see what you like, see what you didn't like, restructure it. Right, we're going to be growing, so we're kind of relying on you, the community. So help us out.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off, and we'll talk to you guys next time.